Okay, so we're going to look at factorising into double brackets. And remember, when we're working with quadratic expressions, we call the coefficient of x squared a, the coefficient of x is called b, and the constant is called c. So the simple case is when a is equal to 1. So if you don't see a coefficient in front of the x squared, then a is equal to 1. And in that case, you're essentially looking for two numbers that multiply to make c and add to make 4, add to make b. So it's two numbers that multiply to make c and add to make b. So the easiest thing to do is just take c, which is negative 21, and write down all of the things that you could use to multiply to make negative 21. Well, we could use 1 and negative 21. You could use negative 1 and 21. You could do 3 and negative 7, or you could do negative 3 and 7. So we just need to look at that list and see which is the one that adds together to make b, which is 4. Negative 3 and 7 make 4, so they're what's going to go in the brackets. Literally x minus 3 and x plus 7. Okay. Right, that's the straightforward case. So the thing to be careful of is to make sure the signs are right, okay? So for example, if this were a negative 4 here, then we'd have to look for this pair, right? Because that would be 3 plus negative 7 makes negative 4. So just be careful about the signs. That's the only thing to look for on that one. Okay, let's look at this one. So this is the non-monic case. Okay, monic means the first coefficient is 1, like mono for 1. In this case, the first coefficient is 3. So for this, we need to use the reverse grid method. So we start drawing a grid, it's a multiplication grid, and we put our first term in the top left and our last term in the bottom right, and the question is what goes here and here. Well, the first step is we're going to do a times c. A times c is negative 24 because it's 3 times negative 8. And now we do the same thing. We look for factors of this number a times c that add to make b. Right, so they multiply to make negative 24 and they add to make 10. Let's start listing. I could have 1 and negative 24, clearly not that. I could have, I could have 4 and negative 6, clearly not that. I could have 6 and negative 4, clearly not that. I could have 12 and negative 2, that looks like the right one to me. 12 and negative 2. So I take those two numbers and they're the ones that I'm going to fill in here. I'm going to have 12x and negative 2x. Then I factor common factors out the rows and columns. So the common factor of the first row is 3x. Common factor of the second row is negative 2. Negative 2 divides negative 2x and negative 8. Common factor of this column is just x, and the common factor of this column is 4. Check you've got that right. 3x times x is 3x squared, 3x times 4 is 12x, x times negative 2 is negative 2x, and negative 2 times 4 is negative 8x. And all we need to do is write that in the brackets. Okay, so you see our first bracket came from this column and our second bracket came from the top. Okay. By factorising, solve 6x squared plus 7x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, so it's a non-monic, and you might want to pause this now and have a go yourself, see if you can factorise it. It's non-monic. So that means I'm going to take a times c, which is 6 times negative 3, negative 18, and I need a pair that are going to add to make add to make 7 and multiply to make negative 18. So I can think quickly on that one. I think that's going to be 9 and negative 2. So I'll draw out my grid. I'm going to stick 6x squared in the top left and negative 3 in the top right. I've got 9x and minus 2x going from this pair here. So start factoring. I can see a factor of 3x here. Here the factor I can see is just negative 1. On the top I can see a factor of 2x, and here a factor of just 3. So I can rewrite this as 2x plus 3 times 3x minus 1, and that equals 0. Now this means I have two things multiplied together equaling 0, which means one of the two factors must be 0, at least one of the two factors, right? The only way you can multiply and get 0 is if one of the things you're multiplying is 0. So we need to solve 2x plus 3 equals 0 to get one solution, and 3x minus 1 equals 0 to get the other solution. So with this one we get 3x equals 1, so x equals 1/3, and with this one we get 2x is minus 3, so x is minus 3/2. Okay, those are the two solutions to this equation. Last case we'll look at is this case, x squared minus 16. Now you should see this, and okay, you can use the same method. You can write this as x squared plus 0x minus 16. You're looking for two things that multiply together to make negative 16 and add to make 0. Well, that has to be negative 4 and 4, right? They multiply to make negative 16, they add to make 0. So you would write this as x minus 4, x plus 4. Right? But there's a quicker way. The quicker way is just notice that these are each something squared. Right? So if you've got something squared minus something else squared, we call that a difference of two squares. And you always just take the square root of each term. So the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 16 is 4. Right, the way we write this is that it's a squared minus b squared is a minus b times a plus b. Right, so it's a good skill to get good at spotting when this happens. Okay, let's do another quick example of of this. Let's do a slightly harder one. 9x squared minus 4y squared. Factor that into double brackets. Well, what's the square root of 9x squared? It's 3x. What's the square root of 4y squared? It's 2y. So it's 3x minus 2y times 3x plus 2y. It's actually really simple if you're good at spotting it.